I'm Michael Sullivan, and I teach information technology at both the high school and the college levels. I also happen to be autistic, and as an autistic educator, I'd like to share with you my views on behavior challenges in the classroom today. But before I get into my content, there are two caveats I need to get out of the way. First, you may have noticed that I described myself as an autistic educator rather than as a person with autism who teaches. It's called identity-first language, and it is the preferred approach by people in the neurodiverse community, even though it's not necessarily the preferred approach of all. The reason why I'm using that today, though, is because the impetus for my talk is that I don't believe neurodiverse students are being seen for who they are. And I want that identity to be a little bit more forward, at least for this consideration. The other caveat I need to get out of the way is that even though this is a critique, it's not intended to cast aspersions against the educational system or its many practitioners. After all, I am one. Instead, my goal is to convince you that we have before us a solvable problem, and that we need to come together to work on that. At the heart of my critique is the concept of disability. That when we see a person in a wheelchair, we think to ourselves, that person is disabled. I want to challenge you to shift your perspective on that just a little bit. Rather than seeing the person as being disabled, I'd like you to start thinking of situations as having the potential to be disabling to people. If we imagine this person to be a computer programmer, for example, would we say that the reliance on a wheelchair impedes their ability to write code? I'd say no. Does it make any sense then for us to think of that person as a disabled programmer? Again, I would say no. If, however, the person's place of work or study requires the climbing of stairs, then we've got a situation that's disabling. But we don't tell the person to discard the wheelchair and haul themselves up the steps on their own. We change the architecture of the space. Because we can tell that the staircase is the problem, not the wheelchair, and not the person in it. We know how to recognize this as a need. The wheelchair is visible, and so we build ramps and we build elevators. What I like about elevators is they can also serve as a metaphor, because they literally lift us up to where we're trying to get to, and they always start by coming down to meet us where we are. The rest of this talk is going to focus on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. Like autism, ADHD is a neurotype. And neurotypes are not diseases. They can't be cured. They're labels we use to describe the way the brain has grown. It's the architecture of the mind. And it's developed in infancy and toddlerhood. And while we can continue to grow as people and as thinkers, we can't fundamentally change the way we process the world. And our schools struggle to recognize these needs as they're expressed. And we struggle to build elevators and offer them to these kids because we have stairs. And we're essentially telling these ADHD children, discard your wheelchairs, climb up on your own. And we can see that it takes them longer to do so, so we give them more time. We consider that accommodating their ADHD. Our schools are structured in a way that would be challenging for any child, right? They're sitting in desks for hours every day. This scenario can prove outright disabling to an ADHDer. The ADHD mind is multitasking, constantly shuttling between the need to consciously impede impulse and the need to attend to the lesson of the moment. that shuttling back and forth is exhausting. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And psychologists tell us that there are many techniques the ADHD mind can use to manage its dysregulation. And some of them are on the screen that you can see right now. But every professional educator will tell you, if they looked at that list, that everything on that list is going to strike the educator as one of two things. Either it's a clear sign the student is off task, or it's an indicator that the student is obstructing the learning of the students around them. Our system doesn't allow for these proven effective methods, which then forces the ADHDer to improvise. And you thought the previous situation was difficult, add improvisation on top of that, and these kids are going to burn out faster. And when they become dysregulated repeatedly in our classrooms, they find themselves in detention. When detention fails to solve the challenges of ADHD, because I guarantee you it does, they then find themselves suspended. And when suspension fails to elevate the ADHDer, they're at risk of expulsion. These are steps, all right, but they don't lead toward educational achievement. They lead right out of the educational system altogether. And what's worse than that, they're not actually stairs. It's an escalator. You fall on this staircase, it's still taking you to where it's designed to go, whether you want to go there or not. In fact, we tell these students the moment we put them on this escalator, your job, figure out how to get off of it. Go. Unsurprisingly, students sometimes fail at that. The statistics that are up here, the number's way too small for you to read. I get it. That's okay. They're just details. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that our system is not designed to succeed for these kids. It only succeeds by chance when the neurodiverse child finds their own improvised way to solve this problem, builds their own capacity to self-regulate within the rules. And this detention, suspension, expulsion system, and it is a system, is problematic in another way as well. In addition to not delivering educational outcomes that we can respect, because let's agree, this is a tragic tale told at scale. These are not a couple dozen students here or there. In Ohio alone, it's tens of thousands of kids every year who get expelled. That in addition to that, it also has the side effect of gaslighting parents and students into believing that neurological dysregulation is a moral failing. We watch them fall repeatedly on the stairs, and we think to ourselves, they're choosing to fail, rather than thinking to ourselves, their failures are from fatigue. Stairs are not enough. We need to build better elevators for these students. We need to stop telling parents, because the detention, suspension, expulsion system tells parents, we disapprove of the way you are raising your misbehaving child. We need to stop telling parents that. Right? We also need to stop telling students that you are unworthy of our educational resources, because our response is to deny them access to those resources. It's not to offer them an elevator or an on-ramp. It's to add another burden to their effort. We need to remind ourselves that we're not in the punishment business. We're in the elevator business. We scaffold education for a living. These are skills we've got. We should be applying them in this case as well. My plea to you is to consider more investment in innovation. At Princeton High School, they have the Innovation Center. At Sycamore High School, they have the Synovation Lab. Both of these are TEDx-worthy talks unto themselves beyond the scope of my talk today. But even they are not enough. Students in both of those districts still get suspended and expelled. Until we decide as a community that that is antithetical to our mission statement, we're not going to solve it. Thank you.